Having a little bit of technical difficulties here, but we are live. Welcome to our RetailWire Roundtable. We are talking today about returns. So this is a live panel discussion. We have two experts on the call. We have another one that's going to join us in just a few minutes. And the topic of returns is such a big topic. I knew that at RetailWire, we needed some real experts in the room. So I want to give the guest speakers a chance to introduce themselves. But first, my name is Chase Binney, CEO of RetailWire. And I'll give it right over to you, Marcus.
Great. Thanks for having me. Marcus Shen, I'm the CEO of Bstock, which is a platform for re-commerce, serving brands, retailers, and resellers.
And
I'm Bernadette Hunter. Also, thank you for having me. I am the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Return Bear, which allows any brand who sells globally to have a local return experience.
Nice. As I prepared for this, I just realized how big of an opportunity gap there is in the returns side of retail. And even some of the facts, I'm not sure if you can, validate this from your point of view, but for every dollar that's spent in retail, 1 in 6 is coming back in returns. So about 17% of the spend in retail is coming back in returns, and it's a big enough issue that there's an entire industry on the secondary kind of returns side of things. But I really wanted to dial into how both of you got involved in the return side of things in the first place, and how did you identify that it was a big enough issue? I see Tim coming in. Tim, are you ready to join us?
I am, yeah. Sorry, I had to switch computers.
Awesome. Okay, good. So he's on his backup computer.
Yeah.
Give us a quick intro. I'm going to throw you under the bus here, but give us a quick intro of who you are. And we just did the intros with the other two.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Tim Fair. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Return. So been here 8 years now, and very excited about the opportunities that remain in e-commerce.
Awesome, cool. So why don't we start with Marcus? How did you first get into the returns side of retail, and how did you identify that it was a big enough problem?
Yeah, so Bstock's actually been around for a while. Kind of I would call it one of the OGs of kind of this space. Been about for 15 years. Founded by a former eBay executive who was looking to kind of, help monetize and help kind of optimize, frankly, a lot of this inventory that was being sold kind of manually. And started kind of borrowing a lot of kind of the marketplace dynamics, a lot of the, let's call it, engagement tools from a software perspective to kind of help people both sell this stuff at better prices and kind of really get market-driven returns, basically for returns.
Was there a pivotal moment where you saw this is the space to be in?
Well, I mean, I've been in the company for about 6 years, and when I joined the company, I didn't really know much about it. I was probably more the part of the problem, meaning like I was probably one of those people who returned a bunch of stuff. But as you kind of dig into it, you see kind of one, it's a big source of kind of growth for a lot of these retailers and brands, right? Like again, everything they're trying to do is kind of make it easier for folks to buy, whether it's online or in the store, and really reduce the kind of barriers to try inventory, right? And so you can see kind of why it actually has occurred this way. Now, what they're doing on the back end, as far as kind of this inventory, is probably where there's a ton of opportunities for companies like ours to help them grease the wheels, to optimize a lot of this supply chain operations in the back end.
I can follow up on that too. I think similarly, I consider myself to be an end consumer first and a returns vendor second. And I got into this kind of by accident, mostly because I spent several years working at a cross-border outbound duty and tax firm that didn't necessarily have a great return solution. And when Return Bear came to me, it was, how do we not only solve domestic returns, but how do we solve them internationally? And a lot of that is obviously with all of the tariffs going on right now, that has definitely changed things. But Chase, I think to your original point of seeing this gigantic problem, for me, it's been a very interesting 2025. When I typically talk to brands, and we work heavily in fashion, which has, upwards of a 30% return rate, higher for swimwear than other things. But these are the people really living and breathing returns at a greater scale. There are usually, I'm either talking to somebody who is running the customer service team, and they just are mired in tickets about returns, or I'm talking to somebody who is in e-com and they really care about the site, the tech, the experience, or I'm talking to somebody in operations who is just looking at, can you follow my SOPs in the warehouse, and can you beat the rate cards I already have? But those three people together are still very siloed. And I think what I've experienced with the brands we work with is returns can tend to be sort of the redheaded stepchild, especially of e-commerce, less so for physical retail. And so it tends to get deprioritized. So what I've seen is it's been a little bit of 2 steps forward, 1 step back in terms of making sure it's prioritized as a revenue generator, a loyalty play, all of those things.
I want to come back to the siloed thing, because I think that's a really big thing in this with most retailers, because they're seeing it like, some see it as a customer service responsibility, others see it's tied to loyalty, others see it's part of sales because you're wanting to turn those complaints into either an upsell, a resell, or an exchange for something to keep that customer. But first I want to go over to Tim. Tim, how did you first, your mic is not connected. When your mic's connected, I want to ask you, how did you first, there you are. How did you first identify that returns was a space worth being in and a problem big enough to solve? All right, we'll come back to him. Back to the silo question. Where are you seeing this responsibility being placed? Which departments, and where should it be shifted to? Marcus,
at the end of the day, for me, it always, in this new world, it's coming down to finance, frankly. It is either a C-level, a CFO, those folks looking at the bottom line and realizing finally that something needs to change. And they tend to be the ultimate champion of that. At least that's what I've seen. There are plenty of champions in all of those orgs. Everybody sees the problem, but a lot of it is getting everyone to work together. There's a lot of cat herding in returns. Not that there's cat herding everywhere, but it's particularly in returns. When it comes down to margin, that's where it really starts to move the needle, is finance.
I think in our experience, actually, it's certainly the finance folks are critically important to this, and they're the sticklers about kind of like how this stuff resells for, kind of how it gets managed. We definitely see kind of both the merchants, or within retailers, it's certainly the merchandisers, like the folks who own categories and have relationships with the brands. And then within the brands, it tends to be kind of the line managers who kind of own each, let's call it, business unit, who really want to, again, for them, it's a lot about protecting the brand equity of the inventory that we're talking about here. And two, kind of understanding kind of the insights that a lot of this data actually, the exhaust that comes out of this, right? Understanding what kind of products are getting returned, understanding what inventory is, for whatever reason, not working in the field or something like that. And so a lot of that information is actually pretty powerful across the organization.
Who do you usually speak to? And your role in this is a little bit different than Bernadette's.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So you're kind of living in that secondary market.
Exactly. So we typically it varies by company, right? Again, I think that what we've certainly seen in the last 5 years is that you have more and more companies, particularly larger companies, who are having dedicated teams to kind of focus on this, like whether it's their supply chain team, operations team. Some folks even have kind of re-commerce efforts, right, as an organization. And so it's a little bit different by company, but by and large, it tends to be somebody who is working very closely between kind of the merchandising teams and the operational teams.
When I looked at the issues related to returns, there's another aspect that is becoming almost more prevalent, which is return fraud. Sorry for the downer topic, but everything from straight, returning the wrong product and putting a dummy product into the package, to kind of frequent returners who may be buying things, using them, and returning them. And when you said it's a cross-departmental issue, I mean, this is getting into definitely the finance side of things. People who are abusing certain policies and whatnot. And so there's this balance between how lenient can you be to earn customers' purchase, to, on the other end, how strict do you need to be to prevent some of the bad actors who are going to abuse a policy? What thoughts do you have on that balance?
For me, I think I see brands fall into one of two buckets: people that have experienced fraud already and people who haven't yet and think it isn't going to be a problem, especially with any economic downturn. We're going to see fraud increase higher than it's already been. I feel very fortunate in that our brands typically don't see significant fraud. I also think there's wardrobing, which is wearing and then returning. There is the proverbial somebody returns a box of rocks. And I think we don't see a ton of that. But what we do see, and whether or not you consider this fraud, is a different story. But in fashion, it's bracket buying. It's, I want this purple shirt. I don't know if it's, I want a medium or a large, I'll buy both, return the one I don't want. And I think some folks consider that fraud. I personally don't, again, because I'm an end consumer first. I think that really comes down to what sort of fit tech you have on your website, and is it good enough to actually give me a decent recommendation. I think the fraud piece also can be mitigated a little bit, but some of the fraud that happens, it's through very elaborate schemes. It's shipping label fraud. If you're, refunding on parcel scan, things like that, that is much, much harder to catch.
From our perspective, we see, and you certainly see it, particularly with a handful of the retailers. It's still a pretty small percentage. Obviously, it's annoying, and it's something that kind of, certainly rankles people's, from an operational perspective. But I think data is going to solve a lot of this. Data is going to really help folks understand whether it's, hey, serial abusers, like relatively easy to kind of find patterns in kind of the data to see who the bad actors are. And you'll see it in kind of the way that they, adjust. They're obviously already starting to kind of tweak return policies already, where you're starting to set whether it's narrow time frames and things like that.
I'll just pop in some comments as they come in live. There was another comment for you, Marcus, actually. Do you compete with a TJX?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways we do, right? So TJ Maxx, they basically go and will directly work with whether it's retailers or brands to source a bunch of that excess inventory, particularly in the overstock world. So we definitely bump into them. I think that what we do is we kind of take this, we can help retailers or brands take that inventory and really diversify it across a huge network of buyers. Like, think of us as like having, a footprint that is, 5 to 10x larger than kind of the retail footprint of a TJ Maxx. And so it really gives them the ability to, one, let's call it diversify kind of the folks they're buying from, or the folks who are buying from them, as well as kind of the distribution that they can make with this inventory.
Tim, you're back. What are your thoughts?
Yes, Wi-Fi remains a challenge, despite my many efforts to make it work. So I mean, we have a lot of thoughts on fraud here at Happy Returns. We increasingly see ourselves value prop wise as a fraud prevention returns method. Some earlier points, I think there's really like a spectrum of unwanted behavior is how I think about fraud. And it ranges on one end from, foreign organized criminals who are soliciting people on the dark web for, like, we call it fraud as a service, all the way to someone who frequently buys dresses, wears them to an event, and returns them. Right. So, for the retailer, this is all bad. For them, some of it is overtly criminal and some of it is kind of a policy question. And so there's a few different mechanisms you can use. We found a lot of success in in-person item validation. So when you do a Happy Return, you have to go to a physical location where we scan the SKU or UPC for the barcode. We find that prevents the vast majority of fraud. The box of rocks thing is not possible, as well as I heard false tracking ID fraud mentioned as well. That's like surprisingly common. We see that like 3 to 5% of the time. And so if you're doing a consolidated return, there is no shipping label, so there's no possibility to do that. So I would say fraud. I mean, all problems are opportunities. Fraud, I think the base case will get worse, primarily because the technical sophistication of the fraudsters is increasing, and the internet is a space to teach people how to do fraud. And so I think it's going to be a bit of an arms race of bad actors versus merchants trying to kind of up level their approaches on both sides. And from our conversations with merchants, compared to especially pre-pandemic, I don't know if anyone, I didn't ever hear returns fraud mentioned anywhere as a topic. And fast forward to 24, 25, when you look at the reverse logistics space, it's maybe the most important issue that people are looking at, if not 2 or 3. And I think it's finally being elevated to a enterprise level concern across these merchants. I think that's A, because it's getting worse, and B, as a challenging macro environment persists, retailers will look for more areas to find opportunities, and returns fraud for many of them is something they've sort of not noticed or managed for a while.
What's like the typical like fraud rate that you guys are seeing on your platform?
Oh, I mean, our fraud rate itself is extremely it's significant. It's materially lower than what we see on a single piece return, mostly because it's the main ways you would defraud. It doesn't work with us. I think there is also an element of, I don't know if you guys ran like high school cross country, but just don't be the slowest gazelle to not get eaten kind of idea. Like you don't have to have it's almost impossible to say that you prevented all fraud, right? I mean, fraud is like a process on some level. But if you have the strongest bars on your house, then criminals will look elsewhere. And we've actually seen evidence of this on the dark web. People will kind of post like, here's how you defraud retailer X. And you see them try to find the weak entry points to maximize their returns to effort.
I will co-sign that entirely. I think similar to Happy, box-free, label-free returns, if you show up with a box of rocks, we're going to open it and be like, this is a box of rocks. So you're not going to get your money back. And that's one of the biggest ways to fight fraud. And we see less than 1/4 of a percentage point. Like, it's negligible and not even worth noting on our platform as well because of that. And I think also just millennials, less than 30% of millennials own printers. So printerless, box-free, label-free consumer returns that are verified at a return point is also, kudos to Happy. That's why it works so well.
I did a return, and it was a Happy Returns.
Oh, great.
Yeah, at a PetSmart.
Okay, yeah.
So I was returning True Classic T-shirts, like the size. Those are like a different size kind of shape, right? That's their kind of niche, is that their T-shirts are sized a little differently, and so they didn't fit me right. And so I brought it to PetSmart, and they had they kind of were like learning like how the Happy Return, like they had to kind of train the other associate how to do it, but it worked well. And
it was actually a dog, right?
Yeah, it was Rufus.
Yeah. I think.
But I thought, like,
I think
it wasn't really
Petco,
related.
actually.
Petco, that's right. It was Petco.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I'll cut you off.
Which I thought that it's kind of another topic, which is like, when I'm going in to make a return, there's an opportunity there. There's a little bit of disconnect if it's Happy Returns in a Petco and I'm returning a T-shirt. What can they do? I mean, I'm there. I happen to own a dog, so I went to that location. But this idea of the return event as an opportunity, does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I mean, it's like a core basis of our business model. So we closely manage and track the conversion rate at our location partners, and this is the kind of value exchange that we have with them. So there's coupons at Staples and Ulta, and then we track the conversion rate there. So it's a nice kind of win-win for everyone involved. And if you talk to shop,
in exchange for being a pickup or a drop-off point, there is foot traffic that ends up converting into something.
Yeah, that's the base case idea there. And retail is always focused on foot traffic, particularly when they compete with e-com. And then if you talk to the shoppers, people really enjoy the opportunity. I know a lot of Ulta diehards who it's like, well, I wanted to get some makeup anyways, and so now I'm going to go. And it's or I was doing some back to school shopping, so I had to go to Staples anyway. So it's a nice kind of arrangement where everyone feels like they're getting a good shake.
Mm-hmm.
And something else. So you mentioned True Classic. We actually manage their returns in Canada, and it's very similar. Like the Ulta, I'm completely in it for the Ulta coupons for Happy Returns in the US. And I think what I find to be sort of fascinating is, you see upwards of 80, sometimes 85% adoption of folks like you who will walk into the Petco because it's so convenient. And if you're already going there, or if you were thinking about going there, or if you get a coupon because you weren't thinking about going there, it changes consumer behavior. But I think the things brands need to realize is that if you're looking at this from a logistics viewpoint purely, you're creating alternative reversed first mile options that not only change the unit economics for the brands, but you're ending up with a really great end customer experience as well, because they're getting a verified return, they're getting their money, their exchange, potentially a coupon at the same time. And it's like, I don't want to be trite enough to say it's a win-win, but it really is.
Mm-hmm. I know that all three of you are on the kind of on that side of returns where you're helping make returns better. But there was a question here from Rick Olson that said, have you been able to identify why returns happen? Is this part of your role in with your customers, with the merchants that you work with?
It is for us, again, because we're heavy fashion. It's usually always sizing. Like just 75% of the time, it's
Okay.
the sizing is off. Sometimes it's I don't like the fabric or the feel. That's sort of secondary, but it's always sizing usually.
Yeah, we find the same thing. I mean, it's very challenging. Being prescriptive about merchandising is kind of getting into the core of how the merchants are working. So we tend not to make suggestions. We collect return reasons and then give them to the merchants to try to kind of figure that out. I think there's a lot of discussion of kind of new tech tools that can help you sort of try before you buy digitally. We haven't had a lot of exposure to that, but people talk about that as a way that you can manage down the return rate. The biggest mover I've seen from merchants is policy changes to reduce the return rate. You probably read in the media about it. Some companies get some buzz because they will kind of fire their top 2% of returners, and they're a fifth of the returns or something, as well as things like return windows or aggregate return amounts. We've seen that to be the most powerful tool merchants can use to reduce returns. Of course, the reason that returns are allowed at all is because customers demand them. So there's a real balance to be struck between trying to minimize your overall returns and still produce revenue. And, we find that the merchants who tend to do the best over time have relatively generous returns policies because it's very challenging to only get rid of the behavior you don't like. And so you accept that as a revenue driver.
I think what we see outside of fashion, obviously, to Bernadette's point, like, sizing is probably going to be sizing and kind of, I guess, color and things like that. Like sometimes it's different in the pictures than it is kind of in person. But even in categories that we kind of work in, consumer electronics, appliances, even like home and garden, like I think a lot of it is, buyer's remorse tends to be a very common one, right? I think sometimes the product is everything it was supposed to be, but people just change their minds, I think. And so we see that probably more common than anything.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what has surprised me the most, I was at a fashion summit in New York earlier this year, and the question was posed to a room full of brands if they were using fit tools on their websites, and pretty much no one was. But it was a swimwear brand on the panel that was talking about using WAIR, WAIR. And if you've seen these tools, they're basically the ones where I can go in and say, I can be on the PDP and say, I wear an Old Navy size large in pants and t-shirts, and it will give me that brand's recommendation of what would fit me. And they had about a 40% adoption rate after they installed that tool. And a 30% reduction in returns. So I continue to be surprised at how many brands haven't leveraged tools like Wear or Bold Metrics or TrueFit or something along those lines. They even make them for shoes now where you can scan your foot. I haven't used one, so I can't speak to how well it works, but that's stopping returns before they start is still a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I see that. I might pull it on the screen here in a second.
I think I see Alana's great comment about store buy-in being crucial to capitalize. I think because we run a box-free, label-free network in Canada, if it were easy to create those things, everyone would do it. Training employees inside of your network in a Staples Canada, it's an ongoing process, especially where you're working with partners that potentially have high store turnover. If you have a lot of college kids working there in the summer and all of a sudden you're teaching them how to use a new piece of software, but it still works. Even if it's a little clunky, it's still a better experience. But you're not wrong to call that out.
Yeah, her comment. Let me grab the comment so people can see that. She said, to Chase's example, though, I feel in-store team buy-in is crucial to capitalize. and it goes with the theme. A lot of these solutions or new strategies take cross-departmental coordination.
They absolutely do. It's again, it's hurting cats. And when it comes to return point networks, it's a different set of cats, but it's still hurting. It's a lot of training and enablement to get it done, but it's completely worth it.
The video, sorry, I put it on when you were talking, but this is that sizing widget that you were talking about. You kind of select what you feel like your body type is around different parts, the shoulders and all that. Let's see if I can replay it.
Yeah, I love these tools. I think that they've got huge potential, but it also requires that the brand really understands their own sizing, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But even there's free ones, Kiwi, Fit Me, I Fit You. There's so many different options that people should be using. Even there's a great RMA out of, I think it's Sweden, called Yalo, where they will dynamically take your fit reasons when you're submitting your return, and they will automatically change your PDP based on consumer feedback to say it runs small, it runs large, the shoes are wide, they're narrow. And I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what's possible with that data at the point of purchase.
That's like Marcus was saying earlier, having the data, you can make these informed decisions.
100%, yes.
What categories do you think are the most underserved from a good return solution?
Ooh, well, I'm going to say beauty and nutraceuticals because typically they don't want returns, right? I think trying to figure out how to do that in a way that makes sense financially, but also from an end consumer perspective. There are too many verticals, especially if you're selling low value products, that are doing the just keep it policy, which is also to the earlier point, people knowing when you have a just keep it policy instead of sending something back, the give it to a friend or donate it, that's also just rife with fraud. But I think those two verticals haven't necessarily cracked the code yet.
Yeah, I would agree. I think verticals that have transportation regulations are very challenging. And basically any kind of regulation, so whether it be DOT or FDA, it just gets much harder to deal with those. And I think beauty Beauty is kind of the perfect storm there because you do have some things regulated for transportation. You do have other things that have regulations for discard. And so frequently, and you have heavily packaged items that are hard to repackage, where if you throw them away, you need to follow a certain set of rules. So that's just something you don't want back. And beauty products can frequently break during shipping, given like the glass packaging they often use. And outbound, you can control for that with packaging, but consumers are not shippers, so they're going to do whatever they want. So for those reasons, I think beauty in general is challenged for e-com returns. If you look at the major beauty kind of omnichannel retailers, they're all doing buy and line return store mostly because the store still struggles to deal with these things, but it is a better equipped to do it than the consumer trying to ship on their own.
I was actually going to say the larger the format, actually the more challenging kind of the returns processing. So, for example, furniture, large appliances, and things like that. I mean, all of that again starts to kind of involve a lot more from a logistics perspective. Repacking, obviously, for consumer electronics it's all a bunch of work. So I would argue that, again, the bigger the stuff, the bigger the problem.
Just a large size, like Wayfair furniture, things like that.
Challenging, right? Challenging stuff.
I think
that you've assembled, right? Can you imagine like things that you've tried to assemble and then try to have to disassemble or kind of try to stick it back into the shrink wrap box? I mean, that's virtually impossible.
Yeah, I mean, like rugs come to mind. There are some D2C rug sellers, and I struggle to do a rug return. And
right.
of people in America, I should be pretty good at returns.
Right.
Foam mattresses.
Yeah, impossible.
Never.
Those might be the example par excellence. I think they just usually tell you to keep them. At least they. I think the whole D2C mattress game has been challenged here lately, is my guess. That is one of the reasons why. So
can't get that back in the bag.
Yeah, no, and you can injure yourself opening it up in the first place. So.
Yeah, Marcus, I saw you guys had a few pallets of fish tanks last week.
Yes. So we had a big customer who was a little bit long on fish tanks, and so they're in addition to moving the inventory to potential small retailers and things like that, we actually were able to place it with some charities and things like that, so that some, whether it's youth organizations and things like that, could get access to really nice aquarium, brand new stuff, right? That just for whatever reason wasn't moving in the way that they were anticipating.
Got another question. How are retailers and brands using data or technology when it comes to figuring out what to do with returns once they come back?
Yeah, I mean, in the apparel space, there's a number of software vendors who deal with kind of dispositioning or processing software. It'll tell you if this kind of damage exists, do this with it. I think that's probably the most explicit technology that I've seen used. Everyone has some version of this, from a checklist to like a software implementation. Software tends to help humans manage complex outcomes, so it's a good fit for this situation, and they often have some kind of configuration tool. Beyond that, we've seen a lot of retailers slice the returns data in a number of ways that can inform merchandising decisions based on the sizing conversations that we had. It can also inform policy changes. If they feel like certain kinds of consumers are interacting with them in ways they don't want to, they can change policy to prevent that.
Well, what are the options?
For the return?
Yeah, put it back on the shelf.
So I think there's the options question, but there's also a quality question. So, are you supposed to, what do you do if there's no shoebox? Do you put it in a bag or do you put it in a box? Do you want certain dresses hung, or do you want certain sequin things put in plastic bags? So the software helps you manage those outcomes. It can also help you make discard. Generally, it's return to stock, liquidation, discard would be kind of the three macro categories. And it can help you make those decisions. Retailers have different biases for the return to stock bar. And then retailers will have different channel partners for liquidation who may want or not want certain things. And so you can program that decision tree into the software, and it'll say, okay, well, this has a small stain. I'm cool with small stains being resold. Okay, put it in a return to stock. This has a large stain. Okay, my liquidation partners can't sell stained things, so I'm going to throw this away. Whereas this one may just not be an original packaging, but otherwise fine. I can't resell it. I can liquidate it, and it'll make those choices for you. So
I think what we're seeing, I think to Tim's point, like the idea that a lot of folks they have kind of, let's call it biases or kind of rules that they've kind of pre-programmed into their businesses. I think where the data becomes really powerful is if you can provide them with kind of, whether it's historical data or things that we're seeing across, the entire industry, a lot of that can inform kind of their decisions and really kind of be much more programmatic about kind of the way they're managing this as opposed to, let's call it, using legacy rules of thumb to kind of manage all this stuff.
There's also some very cool things I've seen on the tech front, such as Loop Returns did an integration with a company that I adore called Liquidonate, which basically at the time the RMA is created by the end customer, if they say this item is damaged or something to the effect of it's not a grade A stock, and you know that when the RMA is initiated, instead of that item ever coming to somebody like us who does physical return grading and processing or going back to your warehouse, you'll get two labels, one to send back the good items, one that Liquidonate basically will send it to a charity and give you a tax receipt for it going straight to a charity in need, which I think is just a brilliant business model, both as a consumer, but as somebody in the space. Even Freight Returns, another RMA, has built an AI where if you want to, you have to take pictures of the items in order to continue your return. And I actually did this with a pair of Nisolo shoes, one of their brands. And I had to put a picture of the top of the shoes, but more importantly, a picture of the bottom of the shoes. So if you can see the bottom of the shoes in that picture using their AI have clearly been worn out and about, then you can change what's happening with the return. And then you can figure out even the re-commerce pieces of it. If you want an item to go into the secondary market on a treat, or even what Poshmark is doing with RMA providers. And if the item has passed the return policy window, doing the click to post with Poshmark that pulls in all of that data. So myself as the end consumer doesn't have to do it. I think that those are some of the very cool front end tech things I'm seeing. On the back end, we have our own software as a warehouse operator, but there's other vendors out there. 2 Boxes has built a beautiful piece of software for grading and processing. There's no shortage of great tech that will give you the data you need to make sure that what hits you is actually something you want. And if it can't be grade A, then it will be liquidated, donated, recycled. Even what Super Circle is doing and those folks that do destruction of goods down to the threads for recycling is also super smart. Things like that.
Yeah, Alana saying yes. Anthropology and Instacart have great instances of using pictures to verify. And it's a very consumer-friendly experience. This has been great. I'm going to wrap up here. Let's do just some final thoughts. But it's just been such a great conversation from a few different points of view. And I'm glad you all have been here because you have points of view from operational to, Marcus, I know like, you're in that side of the market where it's like you see it. And I feel like we've got a super, like a team here of built a superstar.
Every step of the chain right here, right? So
yeah. Yeah. But any final thoughts, just takeaways for retailers who are thinking about returns?
Yeah, I mean, manage your fraud or your fraud will manage you, I guess is what I would say. I think while there's a much higher level of focus on this than in the past, I think in a lot of organizations, it's not a priority. And particularly when you're looking at ways to save money, many businesses have, tens of millions of dollars in the line that they don't really know about.
Mhm.
So it's if you're trying to find some cash, which everyone is right now, really think about returns fraud. It could be a great area of opportunity.
Mhm.
I guess I would say that as we're looking, kind of dealing with more and more of our retailers and helping them manage this stuff, as they kind of look less about kind of, let's call it, using many multiple partners to kind of manage this inventory, we're starting to see folks kind of really align around a single system of record for a lot of this stuff from a re-commerce perspective. And so I really do think that kind of giving company visibility across all of their lines, all of their businesses is going to be extremely powerful for them to really manage at the scale we're talking about.
I would say if you are in this space and you have goals to hit by the end of the year, and you haven't considered looking at where returns fit into that puzzle, there may be some low-hanging fruit there for you to just knock something out of the park, because it usually is, agree with Tim, it's sort of deprioritized and overlooked as where there's a ton of margin just sitting there waiting for you. And taking a fresh look at that is something I would do, especially ahead of peak. I would look at some of the tools to stop returns before they start, but look at what's already happening. Inventory is money, right? At the end of the day, all of your inventory is just like a cash sitting in a warehouse. How can you move that cash as efficiently as possible?
Nice. Thank you all. We're going to end the stream, but it was so great to have you all here and have your perspectives here for the RetailWire audience.
Thank you.
Thanks.